Before we go anywhere, I need to clearly define what I mean by realistic. I am not a historian, and since one of the best ways to evaporate your credibility is to wax authoritative on a subject about which you know nothing, I'm not going to be touching on the ninja in its historical context. However, as a proud owner of the Bonsen Shukai, essentially the closest thing we have to an official ninja handbook, I am qualified to speak, at least somewhat intelligently, on what it means, in the soulful sense, to be a ninja. So that's where my attention is going to be concentrated. What fictional group, society, organization, family, clan, even individual person best fits the operational style and overall ethos of the historical ninja? And to answer that question, we need to do a bit of calculatus eliminatus. In essence, to work out what something is, we have to find out what it's not. And since the most obvious point of comparison is the idea of the lordly samurai, it seems only right that we start off by defining the whole warrior's code of honor and chivalry thing. Also, something I should have mentioned at the start, a group or person does not actually need to be called a ninja in their canon material in order to qualify for the term. Alright, now let's start. To begin with, something that needs to be understood is that, in most historical and modern contexts, regardless of culture, the word honor tends to have one of two distinct but related meanings. In the modern Western lexicon, it most commonly refers to the social principles of masculine moral virtue: strength, bravery, mercy, compassion, generosity, fairness, patience, temperance, wisdom, etc. Whereas in its Oriental form, the most general use is as synonymous with prestige and social status. By that second definition, stabbing your enemy in the back or sneaking into his camp to spy on his battle map is not dishonorable because it's morally disreputable, but because it's not something you can brag about to your friends over a pint in the mead hall after the fact, since the whole point of being a ninja is that nobody's supposed to know who you are or what you get up to when you put on your black pajamas. And by that same token, though a practical and vital necessity in wartime, since being deceptive, underhanded, and two-faced are not viewed as positive or admirable traits by any society, these aspects of their profession tend to be downplayed by the warrior elites, who, remember, owed their social rank, wealth, and success to their martial prowess, which naturally led the ninja to become the samurai's projected Jungian shadow. Essentially, they became the evil demons onto whom all the unseemly aspects of war got dumped, thus propagating the historical myth that the ninja and samurai were not merely two entirely distinct and separate groups of people, but whose preferred tactics and fighting styles were mutually exclusive and philosophically opposed, which simply wasn't the case. Of course, we can't forget about the noble outlaws like the Lone Ranger, Robin Hood, and Zorro, swashbuckling rogues like Captain Blood and Ezio, or dark crusaders like the Shadow or Conan, each of which display, at points, quintessential elements of the shinobi mindset or playbook. And with all that under our belts, we come away with two potential character profiles for the ninja. On the one hand, we have a devious, deceptive, ruthless, Machiavellian shadow figure whose only concern is advancing their cause or achieving their mission by any means. And on the other, we have a noble but obstinate warrior whose ideological imperatives often pit them against both the established authority and the prevalent social conventions thereof. The common denominator being that both are compelled to action by reasons other than superficial glory, i.e., they don't care about other people's perceptions of their actions, they just want to win. Therefore, we're looking for a tenebrous, pragmatic, morally agnostic group whose objectives put them in routine opposition to a mightier military force. Now, the first and most obvious contender you're bound to have thought of would be the assassins from Assassin's Creed. What with their penchant for stealth and ambush tactics, their dedication to waging covert war against a numerically superior foe, and with their eponymous creed being that nothing is true and everything is permitted, they seem like the almost perfect fit for this Nightingale shoe. However, there is one big catch holding them back, and that is that covert agents like the ninjas don't wear easily identifiable uniforms. Like I said before, if I can take one look at a guy in public from across the room and immediately go, "That guy's a ninja," and be right, you're doing it wrong. And with their bright white aesthetic, peaked hoods, signature weapons, and overall ostentatious presentation, most of these assassins wouldn't be blending in even at a modern anime con or video game expo. Even if you didn't know what or who you were looking at, If you saw a guy dressed in all white, wearing a hood, bristling with weapons, and striding around like a wolf stalking a deer through the forest, you'd have to be in a league of stupid all your own to not think something was a little bit off about them. At least until he threw a bag of shiny gold coins out across your path. Then I imagine you might care ever so slightly less. Or maybe that's just me. In any event, next up we have all the various ninja clans and villages from Naruto. And while these ninjas aren't as readily identifiable as such by their get-ups, they also don't really operate in the shadows, by matter of course. Sure, they sneak around and gather intel on occasion, but so do the Spartans and even the Space Marines. And while, in theory, their magic powers should give them an edge over a regular military force, as far as I can see, there exist no such regular forces in this world, so it's basically just a bunch of super soldiers going at each other. And while you may be tempted to think the same applies to Mortal Kombat's Lin Kuei, recall that Scorpion and Sub-Zero are both extreme outliers and literal renegades, meaning they do not represent the clan as a whole in terms of their prowess and general MO. That said, since they are the only two out of the clan we ever see in action, I really can't say much about them outside of that same anime protagonist style of mold. Now, I'm going to be completely honest. There's so many more ninja and ninja-adjacent clans, groups, and organizations across all the various genres of fiction that I could spend probably the next 20 minutes just listing them all. But that wouldn't be very fun or productive for either of us, so I'm just going to go ahead and group the most famous ones up into tiers and judge them accordingly. Sound fair? All right, let's do this. Starting off at the very bottom of the tier list, we have Zelda's Yiga and the TMNT Foot Clan. While these two do tick all the aforementioned boxes, they're so laughably ineffective at everything they do that it'd honestly be an insult to stormtroopers to toss them into the same bucket. And yes, I realize the Yiga are supposed to be the butt of every joke, but the Foot still rank even below them in my view, since they not only get their asses kicked in droves by a group of teenagers, but they also insist on using ancient Japanese farming implements and swords despite living in an era of advanced long-range sniper rifles and machine guns. The same thing is true for the League of Shadows and Court of Owls. Recall, a ninja is supposed to be a pure utilitarian guerrilla fighter. They use the weapons and tactics they do out of sheer practical necessity. These Muppets are clearly just the nocturnal version of the Swiss Guard, ceremonially observant of a romantic time long ago, not a serious contender for world domination or supremacy. However, the Ashikage clan from G.I. Joe, the faction that trained both Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, gets a pass in this regard solely for the fact that they actually do use and train with modern weapons, as well as traditional and improvised devices. Speaking of improvised weapons, the Agency from the Hitman franchise and the High Table Assassins from John Wick pretty much have the whole heart under a blade side of things locked down. Plus, as illustrated when the hit went out on John Wick, the assassins can be anyone. Men, women, even homeless people can be agents lurking in plain sight, which is, again, the singular area where Agent 47 gets a knock. Apart from being hardly inconspicuous, he also has a literal barcode tattooed on the back of his head. Technically, you could argue the Men in Black are the crème de la crème of clandestine organizations due to their agents having the power to straight up delete people's knowledge of their existence. But their main function isn't combative, which is what keeps them off this list. And before anyone mentions it, I should also have explained somewhere near the beginning that the difference between a ninja clan and a special forces division is that the former is a craft, while the latter is just another job, much like how being a cop or a firefighter or a doctor is a job. When you join a ninja clan, that is your whole life now. When you're a three-letter agent, no matter how far your mission takes you, no matter what you see, no matter what you hear, no matter what you do, at the end of the day, when you take that uniform off, you go back to being a regular old John or Jane Doe. A ninja has no such real personage. They are their craft, and it in turn defines who they are as a person. The problem many of these organizations run into is that they tend to express this metamorphic baptism by physically marking their agents, much like a criminal gang or cartel does, which, while it makes it easier for them to identify their fellow operatives, it also makes it far easier for the authorities whose territories they want to infiltrate to do the same. Which is why, out of all the fictional organizations I could come up with who fit the qualifications for a ninja clan, none so perfectly epitomize the concept, in my estimation, better than the rule of two lineage of Sith Lords. Now, before you judge me, and don't act like you're surprised I'm wanking off Star Wars again, let me explain my reasoning. Not only does Bane's Black Dynasty tick every single one of the necessary ninja boxes I've mentioned so far, they do so in the most practical, pragmatic, and ruthlessly utilitarian way I've ever seen done in fiction that isn't outright pretending to be historical. They hide in plain sight to avoid being hunted down and slaughtered by the Jedi. They're strong, but they're not 10,000 on one strong. Their code emphasizes power and victory above all moral conceits. They're trained in all kinds of martial arts and with all kinds of weapons, as use of their lightsabers or dark force powers would too easily give their presence away. They're well-versed in the arts of politics, diplomacy, business, philosophy, science, art, etc. Keen to dismantle the Jedi Order and the Republic they're sworn to guard from within, they're so proficient at disguise, both in the mundane and the metaphysical sense, that the Dark Lord himself can stand at the very heart of their enemy's stronghold, and their highest masters won't sense a single trace of his true nature. Which, if that's not the truest essence of ninja, I don't know what is. Right, so I could very easily keep this thing going for another few hours, but I think we all get the gist. Let me know what you think down below, both about the topic and about the new AI voice model and video background choices. And while you're at it, consider also liking, subscribing, and all the other YouTube jazz as well. Also, if you like these sorts of bantering discourses, links to my X and Discord will be in the description. And of course, links to Amazon, where you can check out my books, will be there also should you fancy tossing me a coin. And with all that said and done, until next time, stay safe, stay sane. Always remember to heed the timeless wisdom of the Bansen Shukai.
You should embrace the old ways of the shinobi who served under ancient great generals. But remember not only to keep to these ways, but to adapt them, each dependent on the situation and the moment. Ignorant ninja are not aware of this principle.
It is folly to see something as unchangeable and stick to an old method without realizing that things keep changing and are in flux.
And may peace be ever upon you.